All right, so we're going to install Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper.js into our Rails 6 app. So if you're coming from Rails 5 or you're coming from uh, integrating Bootstrap using your gem file, the first thing you'll need to do is to open your app in your whatever you're using to develop. Go to the gem file and remove gem bootstrap or whatever, however you integrated bootstrap and jQuery. So if you had, for example, gem bootstrap, and gem jQuery Rails, previously in your gem file, just remove those, delete them, click save, and then in your terminal, you will have to rebundle install. So I'm going to change directory into my app. Since I'm on a Windows machine running Linux, I'm going to change directory into the MNT and C directories. And then I'm going to go into code, which is where all my Rails apps are. And I'm going to change directory into Rails, or I'm sorry, recipe Rails 6. That's the app we're working in. I would bundle install again if I'm coming from Rails 5 and I'm removing Bootstrap and jQuery. Okay, we're going to start sort of from fresh here. Just as a refresher for those of you who are following along with the video tutorials, we created a scaffold called recipe. And in that scaffold, we give it a title and a description. So I'm going to run the server just to kind of show you. This is what we've created. I'll reload the server here. This is the index page for our recipes. We can create a new recipe. So chicken parm, delicious. And we can create, this is just our default scaffold from Rails. If you want to follow along, I can link the first video in the description. But that's where we left off. So what we want to do in this video is to add Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper.js. So this is going to be a different process than using, and to kill your server, if you didn't know, it's Control-C. That'll kill the Rails server. It's going to be a different process than using gem files. The reason for this is because Rails 6 uses a Webpacker gem, and basically the Webpacker gem packs or combines all of your JavaScript files into one. It sort of is a way of making it more efficient. But adding Bootstrap, adding jQuery is actually a little bit tricky. There's no real easy way like there was in Rails 5. So to do that, we're going to use Yarn because Webpacker uses Yarn. Yarn allows us to add various different JavaScript libraries. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into your app directory, and we're going to do Yarn, and we're going to do add. And then we can just add whatever JavaScript libraries we're interested in adding. So in this case, we're going to add Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper.js. So you can just add all three and separate them just by a space. So I'm going to click enter, and Yarn should grab those three packages and should install them into your Rails app here in a second. Make sure you're connected to the internet because it's downloading and installing them. We can see success. We've got three new dependencies. So three new dependencies. They are Bootstrap 4.4.1. We can see what version, jQuery 3.4.1 and popper.js 1.16.1. If you're going to be using Bootstrap with JavaScript, using the built-in classes, you need popper.js. That's what that's for. That's specifically for Bootstrap. Okay, so that's step one. Step two and there's really only 3 steps. It's fairly easy. But step 2, we're going to go into our Rails app in whatever development environment you develop in. This is Sublime Text. And I'm going to go into the config folder, and I'm going to go into Webpack, and I'm going to go into environment.js. So basically, this will allow us to define what JavaScript modules to use in the entire environment. On every page, on every um, model within our Rails application. So to do that, I am going to copy and paste a bit of code. And you can find this in a tutorial that I'll link in the description. So in between the first and the last line, so in between lines 1 and 3, I'm going to paste this Webpack constant. So I'm going to add jQuery, and I'm going to set jQuery, and I'm going to add popper. Okay. So again, this is an environment.js, and that's in our config Webpack folder. So inside of Webpack, we're going to add this code into environment.js, and this just declares throughout the entire app, let's use jQuery and popper. And so the last step then is we're going to go into our application.js file. And so if we go into app and JavaScript, and then we can go into packs, and that's where we'll find our application.js file. This is automatically created with some new syntax for Rails 6, automatically created by the Rails application. And so we're not going to actually have to require jQuery, because instead of doing it in our application.js file, we've just done it in our environment.js file. Okay, so we can skip that step. That step was sort of pretty standard for Rails 5. The only thing we'll have to do in our application.js file is we're going to want to import Bootstrap. And so this is, again, a new way to import the Bootstrap framework into our application.js file. Okay, and then the last thing, I lied, there's 4 steps. So the last thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go into our CSS file. And we're going to want to rename this file application.scss to use Sass. And then we can delete all of the pre-existing code. So we're in our application.scss file, and we're going to import Bootstrap. And to do that, it's a little different than it used to just be Bootstrap. But since we added the package via Yarn, the directory is a little bit different. So we'll do import bootstrap /scss/bootstrap. For some folks, they've reported needing a little tilde here. So if this breaks, maybe try adding a tilde before Bootstrap. For me, it worked without the tilde. So just keep that in mind. So we've added Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper via Yarn. We've done nothing in our gem file except for removed old instances of Bootstrap. We've added in our environment.js file jQuery and popper, and we've imported Bootstrap into our application.js file. So what we can do now is we can test and see if this is working. And what I will do is I'll boot up the server. And what I'm going to do to test to see if it's working is I'm going to actually just go to Bootstrap for modal. And I'm just going to grab the modal because this will tell us if the JavaScript and jQuery is actually working, because the Bootstrap modal requires jQuery to be working. So if we click that, you can see that's what it should look like. So I'm just going to actually grab this code just to test to make sure it's working. I will delete this out of the app here in a second. But what I'll do is I'll go to the views and I'll go to recipes or whatever your scaffold that you're working in is. And I'll go to the index and I'll just drop this, all of this right after recipes. Again, we'll remove this. I just want to test it. And so we can now go to localhost 3000. That should just give you this because we haven't set our root in roots.rb yet, but we can go into recipes and we can see the index. And in the index, we should see that Bootstrap. If Bootstrap got installed correctly, we should see that Bootstrap modal. Let's check the server. Okay, so there's the modal, and it's definitely being styled, so we know the CSS is working. If we click this, we can see the modal is actually working too. So we know our instance of popper.js is working, which also relies on jQuery. So all of that's working. We should be good to go. Like I said, you may need to, in your application.scss, add a tilde here. For whatever reason, it kind of didn't work for me. It seemed to work for a lot of other people. Let me see if that breaks it. Yeah, see, that breaks it for me. Not sure why. Not sure why. But that, let me remove that and reload. There we go. And that's the process. So we know we got Bootstrap styles and JavaScript working. That's all I wanted to accomplish in this video. So that's how to get Bootstrap 4 going with Rails 6. It's a little bit of a different process. Hope that you found this helpful, and in the next video we'll integrate nested form fields via Cocoon Gem in Rails 6. Okay, that's it. Thanks.